About a year ago, some friends and I went to a vintage arcade for a birthday party. It had your Pac-Mans, your Marble Madnesses, your Black Knight pinballs, Gauntlet. It had a bit of everything. What struck my fancy for about a solid hour, while the rest of them were trying to beat each other's Tetris high score, was this beauty of a cabinet they had in their basement, tucked away in the corner. Something I had only played in a Williams Classic CD-ROM in the mid-90s. I had found what would have been my biggest quarter burner had I been born any earlier than 1989. An honest-to-goodness joust cabinet. I stayed on this thing so long they had to come find me to tell me they were leaving. I'm a bad friend, I know, but there's a reason I got glued to this thing. This game scratches so many gaming itches for me. It has skill shots, positioning, increasing stage difficulty, evolving strategies, weird setting, and extremely satisfying physicality and sense of momentum. It's got a bit of that gaminess that arcades and mobile games capture so well. And you're probably wondering why I'm talking about Joust in a video titled Pikmin Thoughts, a Retrospective. It's because I get some of the similar feelings when I play Pikmin. But before I get into that, let me introduce myself. And how I came to the franchise. A friend of mine introduced me to Pikmin in 2009 while I was still in college. This was about 8 years after the game had come out initially. She and I were big StarCraft 1 players at the time, and she wanted me to check out the game because it was similar, but you played a character on the ground rather than be some sky guy conducting troop movements from some lofty position. She also said it was incredibly cute.
And I'm all about cute.
This game's also, it's kind of brutal. It's got a bit of realism to it. So she let me borrow it, and I fell instantly in love. From the charming, ambient music to the simple yet high-stakes combat and odd futuristic setting. All of it. I loved it. After I gave the game back, I went out to my local retro store and bought a copy for myself along with the sequel. I was literally and figuratively sold on the concept of Pikmin overnight. Since 2009, I've played all 4 of the Pikmin games in the franchise. I know some of you out there like to dissuade Hey Pikmin from the family, but hey, it's the odd cousin. It's there. It exists. So I've gotten to see how it's deviated and changed over the years, what's improved, what's stayed the same. So I've got a little bit of knowledge about all 4 games, and I'd like to talk about it. I just need a place to dump all my knowledge and experience with the first Pikmin game. And what inspired me was watching speedruns and retrospectives, and it really got me to thinking maybe I should put my own thoughts and perspective on the series for any of you who will listen. And what I'd like to do is talk about Pikmin 1 separately from the popular opinions and zeitgeist, and I'd like to expose its strengths and design while being fair about its faults and oversights. It's a fairly polished game at the end of the day, but it does have its fair share of quirks and design flaws and oversights. I'd like to go level by level to a point and take it one step at a time. It may sound a bit like a tutorial or a Prima strategy guide or some other review, but for that more factual nature, I don't shy away from it, and I won't apologize, so be warned, it's going to get long in the tooth. One of my inspirations to do this video was an extensive 7-hour review/retrospective for Pokemon Omega Ruby by YouTuber Shaymay, so my tastes in long-form reviews are firmly cemented. I hope to not be quite as long-winded, but I have played this and the other 3 in the series, and I just have so much to say about it. And I'll start with the first one, and the things I'd like to cover, TLDR if you will. I'd like to cover the intro and the ramp up, the level design, the combat, the difficulty as we come to it and on an enemy by enemy and situation basis, and to a lesser extent the aesthetic and world and premise. So if you're looking for a 15-minute acute bit of 2001 nostalgia, this is not the place. I'm going to go step by step in the levels. It's going to be juicy, slow, and take 10,000 years to digest inside the sand-belching mirror slug pit. So strap yourself in and be ready to be hit by Rosalina's plot asteroid. It's time to crash at the aptly named impact site. Once you hit the button on a new file of Pikmin, you get a wordless opening of our favorite space trucker Olimar getting clobbered by what I always like to say looks like a stray starbit that Rosalina sent hurtling through space to smack the dolphin, seemingly
On accident.
This sets up the plot of the game quite seamlessly. You see little bits of the ship break off as the ship careens through the atmosphere towards the planet. Once you get there, Olimar lets you know he's only got 30 days of oxygen, or air, whatever he breathes. Kinda lucky to be alive.
Hey, I'm recording this after. I know now that Olimar is not able to breathe oxygen. It's in fact poisonous to him. So that's why he can't survive on Earth. Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
As soon as you get control of Olimar, the first thing I notice on replays is how zoomed in the camera is. On subsequent playthroughs, I find this inconvenient, but I realize it's to limit your vision on purpose. Olimar is disoriented and lost. He's crawling around on an unknown planet when he literally stumbles across the first onion. The camera will zoom out again like it did when Olimar looks at the wrecked ship for the first time. After the onion spits out the first seed, the first thing the player is expected to do is kind of interact with it, see which buttons work. It takes a few seconds to grow and pop up, and I'll get more into the timing of this later, but for now the player plucks it. The game gives you some dialogue on how to control the camera and what to do with the Pikmin, but once you get control again, the best thing to do is just get your hands dirty and play around with what you can chuck the Pikmin at. If you chuck the Pikmin at the first flower near the onion, the Pikmin defeats it, and you gotta chuck him back at it to carry the pellet back into the onion. They eliminate the two-step process later in the Pikmin games, but for now we gotta deal with comparatively simpler Pikmin. The game treats you to some more Olimar talking about how this must be how Pikmin propagate, and you see two more guys pop out of the onion. So far, after having been given the reins to Olimar, the game has taught you about the camera and the Pikmin controls and Pikmin propagation, all within the first few minutes, all with well-placed interactables and short snippets of dialogue. What I can look back on from my 2019 standpoint is the lack of waypoints and pinging screen garbage. It's all just there. Just go around, mess with stuff, push buttons, get your hands messy.
You can't be afraid to take chances, make mistakes, get messy.
I understand the game has to corral you into this area, so in all honesty, the onion and the plants and the pellets are the only things to mess with, but the tutorializing isn't necessarily hand-holdy, it's a bit more applicative, show, then tell. Near the onion and between some of the other flowers is a box with the number 10 on it. I know this is a bit more on the nose, much like the posy pellets, and in my mind, the posy pellet numbers and the numbers on some of the objects in the world are Olimar's mental representation of how many Pikmin he thinks it would take to lift something of this size. You gotta use your imagination. Once you gather 10 Pikmin, the only option aside from wandering around chucking guys at random things is to put them on this box. This is your first big obstacle the game teaches you have to interact with. Within eyesight is the oh-so-luckily placed engine to the dolphin. The game gives you some dialogue about it when you get close enough to it or put a Pikmin on it. You notice it takes more than 10 to 15 guys you may already have. Up the ramp you have created with the box, you find more posy pellets for your guys to take back. Once you have all of these, you should have around 25 guys total, more than enough to carry back to the engine. Before you do, though, the game does tempt you to try and break down the stone wall at the rear of the round room in the middle of the map. Red Pikmin will wail away at it in vain if you try to set them on it, and they will give up and return to you. If you zoom the camera all the way out so you can see the little puddle on the other side of the wall, you can see that there's another piece back there. Now I love this. Not only is the game showing you that there is a part inside a clam back there, there is an obstacle in the way, and that you will probably have to come back with something from later in the game. It's a bit of Metroidvania style backtracking.
And I live for that shit.
It is a bit of a trap, however. I'll talk more about the yellows and bombs later, but if you come back here with just yellow Pikmin before getting blue Pikmin, It's a bit of a trap. If you don't experience what water does to reds and yellows in the next area, there's the potential to waste an entire day if you come back with just yellows and reds and not the blues to get the part out. Now, once you get the engine back to the ship, there's a small cutscene, and you get to see the first liftoff of Pikmin 1. You get treated to the oh-so-catchy End of Day tune, and after saving the game, you get to go to the overworld map, which has another catchy tune. And it also opens up the first of the main areas of Pikmin, the Forest of Hope. Now, before we move on to the Forest of Hope, I'd like to say I quite appreciate the impact site. It's a cute little nugget that gives you just enough to get used to the game before getting your hands real dirty on the next few zones. There is no way to lose a Pikmin, although I have heard you can get them sucked inside the engine and crushed. I've never seen it done, but I've heard that it is possible by some friends of mine. It's a great little zone. There's no clock and there's no enemies, but there's just enough to keep you curious. It's a great intro zone. It doesn't get enough credit in my book. If at any point I call the Forest of Hope the Garden of Hope, my apologies. I have played too much Pikmin 2 and 3, and can and will possibly call it by the wrong name. Please understand. As soon as you land, you're introduced to two new things. The first are the bone/coral gates, and the second is the grass. The gates take a commitment of Pikmin and time to take down, and will open up paths once taken down. The second is the grass. The grass is both helpful and slightly annoying. If you walk over the grass with a squad of Pikmin in the GameCube release, Pikmin will automatically drop out of the squad and start plucking it out of the ground. And if you commit just one, he will pluck every piece. And if you get what speedrunners call nectar trolled, you will get 1 or 0 nectars, and a single individual will hog all the nectar for himself. And that brings me to what nectar is in Pikmin. You get it from grass, breakable rocks, and from the honey wisp fairies that roam around the stages. When a Pikmin absorbs nectar for the first time, he will become upgraded and bloom a little flower on his head. It increases his run and carry speed and makes him a little stronger as well. Good things all around, especially if you can get an entire squad to be flowers. There is a middle stage between leaf and flower. It's the bud Pikmin, and you can only get those by leaving Pikmin in the ground for a long time, or just having Pikmin roam around with you for a long time in the game. I believe that's in further Pikmin games. In this instance, the only way to get that free upgrade is to just leave them in the ground for a little while and pluck them before they become flowers. And if you can get a squad of flowers, buds, and leaves, like 30-30-30, you can create this cool looking Pepsi logo of an army that wags behind you. If you can get an entire squad to upgrade off of 1 nectar puddle, you are both a talented and lucky individual. That's my other small complaint about nectar in Pikmin 1. Once a Pikmin starts drinking nectar, there's a super short timer, like less than 2 seconds on how long the nectar can be latched onto and sipped by other Pikmin. Remember the nectar troll? The first Pikmin to start sipping is the pace setter, so you better have your squad bunched up with the C-stick or the D-pad on the Wii version. Now after you take down the gate, you are greeted by your first enemy, a dwarf Bulborb, the Goomba of Pikmin. This is a forced intro to combat. There are multiple ways to take it down. If you leave it alone and get too close, it will chase after your Pikmin, so it's better to just take it head on. Your options are to chuck Pikmin at it. One well-placed Pikmin will headshot it and kill it instantly. A bunch will mob it, distracting it in front and flanking it on the sides. And you can just simply swarm it with the C-stick or the D-pad. And that, my friends, is combat. The same way you interact with everything else is how you interact with combat. Tossing and swarming.
I love that simple shit.
Now, this next part will sound a bit like a step-by-step tutorial. It's to emphasize progression and skill pacing. Before we continue to the rest of the level, let's go over what we've already been introduced to before taking our real first steps into the first level of Pikmin 1. We've gone over Pikmin propagation, part recovery, upgrading, rock walls of both kinds,
combat. It's not even noon on day 2. That's a lot to take in, especially for someone who may not play a lot of RTSs. Period is what I'd like to compare to the first few rounds of Joust. Enough of a tutorial to get you used to the controls and the premise of the game, and well-paced and easy enough to wrap your mind around and get you invested. Once you take out the dwarf bulborbs in the immediate area, you also find the first stick bridges. These are used in this instance to cross water, and later to create shortcuts. If you try to go in the water with red Pikmin, they start drowning. In Pikmin 1, they drown quite fast, so you must be quick with calling them back before they go. Wander around a little bit more and you find 2 paths you can explore. Both contain full-size bulborbs. These are not only larger than dwarf bulborbs, but have more HP and can take out more Pikmin at a time than their smaller counterparts. Fighting the first one of these in the game is what I'd like to call the first mini-boss. There's strategy involved. Yes, if you have a large squad, you can swarm it, but first-time players don't know that yet. The game just says, here's a sleeping T-Rex, poke at it with an army of tiny men until it's dead, please and thanks. Once you clear the 2 accessible areas in front of you of enemies and pellets, it gives you access to 2 easy ship parts, the shock absorber to the left of the gate and the eternal fuel dynamo to the right. What you will notice is these are heavier than the engine from the landing site. On the right hand portion of the main area is another white gate. Obviously you'll have to commit Pikmin to it. If you spent a good chunk of time fighting and gathering, the noon chime should sound around this time. This is to signify that you're halfway through the day. Each day is around 17 minutes in length. Mentioned on day 1 is the fact that Olimar only has a month of life support. This is where the time management really starts to take an effect. You gotta obtain the required pieces before the 30 days to launch and escape PNF 404 successfully. If you are an avid speedrun viewer like myself, time management is already everything. But if you take your time and get 1 to 2 parts per day in a casual playthrough, you should have no problem finishing on time. After you break down the second gate to the right of the first and clear out the next small group of mobs, you will find another onion and unlock the high-flying bomb-toting yellow Pikmin. In the immediate area around the yellow Pikmin are a few rocks scattered around, and there's also a can full of the same rocks. These are the bombs. This is where I'm going to talk about bombs in Pikmin 1. My bomb, if you will. Visually, by placing the bombs in close proximity to the yellow starting zone, you will be tempted to chuck reds and yellows at the white gates next to the yellow onion. This will prompt the small cutscene zoom on the yellows once they pick up a bomb. If you dismiss your group, you will see bomb-carrying Pikmin are classified as a different type, even in the grab indicator on the bottom of the screen. By grabbing one and throwing it, hopefully at the gate on your first playthrough, you get a small explosion and the gate will drop by 1 stage. This is the primary application of bombs, taking down stone gates exclusively, followed by the bone gates and enemies secondarily. Tossing a bomb Pikmin and getting an explosion will again prompt a tutorial blurb by Olimar to tell you about the mechanics of bombs. This is where my issues with bombs come in. As mentioned before, you can dismiss bomb Pikmin the normal way and have your Pikmin separate into squads. You can whistle at bomb Pikmin and they will rejoin your squad. But if you toss a Pikmin carrying a bomb and he doesn't toss it at anything or get eaten by a creature, he just sits in the idle, pale, glowing state. If you whistle a Pikmin put into the neutral state by tossing and not dismissal, he will drop the bomb. This isn't necessarily intuitive with the design of the game. If you toss a bomb Pikmin at an enemy, but not near enough to toss the bomb, but you don't want to get near enough to attract the enemy's attention, whistling would be the preferred method of retrieval. The enemy just may run at the Pikmin and eat him and the bomb. This gets the desired effect of hurting the enemy with the bomb, but you gotta sacrifice a Pikmin to do so. Also, simply forgetting the mechanic is easy to do as well. Doing this near your team, especially in tight quarters or in tough situations, can shave down squads and cost you valuable time. This is one of the first pitfalls a new player can stumble upon in Pikmin 1 are accidental bombings of your squad. Heck, I still forget to do the correct bomb mechanics in replays of the game. This mechanic isn't quite right until Pikmin 3 and the Wii release of Pikmin 1, where they fix the mechanic to where they never drop the bombs unless they are tossed at or near an enemy or obstacle, or eaten with the bomb. Placing bomb Pikmin Pikmin is also another factor to their effectiveness. In Pikmin 1, you can toss Pikmin further than the limit of the targeting reticle by getting a running start and tossing. In the Wii port, you can do the same thing, but you can see the max range of the toss and have a better idea of its trajectory because the Wiimote pointer can go outside the original range of Olimar's toss. There are 2 skips in the first zone that are trivialized with this new accessible range of the Wii controls, and yes, one of them does involve bombs. More on that later. Now that the yellows and bombs have been discussed to death, I think it's time to move on to the bosses and the skips. There really isn't much else to learn in this area aside from how to fight bosses, one of which we see more of in another area. Outside the first Bulborb fight, the Forest of Hope holds 2 actual bosses. The first is the Burrowing Snagret. To get to it, you must bomb the second white stone gate by the area you found the yellow Pikmin. Fight the Bulborbs in the area and push aside another box with the number 10 on it. This is the first pseudo skip of the game. The expected way is to get blues from the forest navel and come back and have them push aside the box, but the easier way is to just toss reds and yellows on top of the box and whistle them to the other side. You may lose 1 or 2 to the puddles, but you gotta crack a few eggs to make an omelet. The other part of the skip is instead of taking your entire 100 squad army on the bridge over troubled waters, take a squad of 80 reds to the nook around where you found the Eternal Fuel Dynamo, throw the entire squad onto the ledge where the nectar grass is, get them distracted with plucking, and just make sure the Snagret closest to the edge doesn't spawn on them. You won't lose any guys this way. There are only 3 burrowing Snagrets in the main story, and they're all grouped together here. You gotta fight them to get to Olimar's Geiger counter. The Snagret is a snake/bird hybrid with a huge mouth. Fighting these towering fusors is another place the devs gave you options. You can wait for the Snagret to completely emerge from the ground and toss guys at their head. This will take 2 or 3 rounds of wash, rinse, repeat. Intermingled with these stages are parts where you can swarm the Snagret when they get stuck in the ground. This is the safer, quicker way to kill them if you have the patience and speed to take advantage of these parts of the fight. The Snagret is a fun fight and isn't necessarily difficult. To me, the biggest hurdle is learning how it can hurt you and adapting to its movements. The Snagret can eat entire squads if you are playing sloppily or get flanked by another of the trio. To me, isolating the single Snagret with the part and keeping combat contained is the hardest part of the fight. Getting outnumbered and overwhelmed is the real challenge in this fight. I will say there is a way to only kill the required Snagret. If you isolate and eliminate the Snagret nearest the water, he'll drop the Geiger counter. Put as many Pikmin on the part as you can and run ahead of the part to distract the other 2 heads. You can get the part by without suffering any more losses to your troops, but I wouldn't recommend it. It is incredibly rewarding to pull off and can be repeated on the next boss, the Armored Cannon Beetle. The Armored Cannon Beetle is situated in what I would call the backyard of the Forest of Hope. It's behind technically 2 coral gates, one hiding the arena and one submerged in water that you were supposed to use blue Pikmin you get later on to help Olimar get through. But this gate can be skipped with 2 to 3 well-placed bomb Pikmin. And this skip is made much easier on the Wii version, where you can just point next to the bridge and the Pikmin will immediately walk over. On the GameCube version, you kind of have to do the running throw method where you get a little extra distance out of your throw, and it's hard to really know exactly where the Pikmin's gonna land because the GameCube version doesn't allow you to just point straight to where you want to throw. Once you get in the arena with the Armored Cannon Beetle, fighting the boss can be a little tricky. The boss can go on a genocidal rampage if you get the timing wrong. Otherwise, he's a cakewalk. He shoots boulders out of his snout and has no weak point in his initial state. First-time players must try things out and take advantage of the context clues. He sucks in a great gulp of air before spitting the boulder. This is the clue to defeating him. You have to toss Pac-Man into his mouth. Yes, you have to toss a yellow mouth creature into his mouth. And you have to toss Pikmin into his mouth to plug it up, so he overheats and you can throw Pikmin on his now obvious weak spot. Wash, rinse, repeat 2 or 3 times and you should have this guy beat. I do like this boss. My friend showed me how to beat him back in 2009, 2010 when she lent me the game, but even knowing how to beat him, he can still be formidable. I appreciate how devastating yet simple he is. Defeating him secures the path to the radiation canopy, but you don't necessarily have to defeat him. You can plug him up with a Pikmin to overheat, and then quickly pick up the radiation canopy, and when he cools off again, do it again. Now that I've covered bosses, bombs, and some of the skips, There is one part I would like to discuss. The part is something you should be able to pick up on day 2 and day 3 if you're kind of just taking your time. It's just beyond the rock wall by the yellow starting area. It's the one that's beeping. It's one of the first parts to make a notable noise on the overworld. Once you recover this part, it allows you to see the entire map of each area and will highlight where parts are with white stars on the map. Now to me, this is not necessarily a choice I would have made. This changes the exploration side of the game. Instead of asking, will I find a part beyond this puzzle in that area I can barely see, the game instead asks, I must complete this puzzle because there is a part over there. In a world inundated with open world games with maps full of garbage and fluff, I'm looking at you, Assassin's Creed, I'm less inclined to choose this as my preferred type of map. However, since the point of the game is the parts, I understand why they chose the radar to do this. I know this is a game made to be replayable, and the choice is ultimately beneficial to the gameplay of the first game in the series. I will also say I appreciate the change they made to the radar in Pikmin 2, where it just chimes louder and louder and louder. It does this instead of pointing you directly to what you are looking for. Each radar lends itself to the gameplay of its respective game, so I won't spend all of this video complaining about a simple map mechanic. Again, this isn't a deal breaker for me, it's just my personal take on those types of maps in games. Now that we've covered the Forest of Hope, I think it's time to go spelunking, my friends. Welcome to the dark. No, seriously, that's the first thing you're going to notice about this zone. It's dark because it's in a cave. But this can get disorienting in the middle areas of the map where the army of fiery blowhogs are found. The cliffs and ridges are nearly the same shade of beige and brown as the others in the area, that when they do appear out of the artificially reduced sight range, you still may not know what part of the map you are in. I remember checking my map frequently in that area, even if I had the camera zoomed all the way out. On subsequent playthroughs, I remember even running into the pond where the anti-dioxin filter and the Ramuna soda bottle are found, simply because I did not have any context clues as to what direction I was headed, because everything was a drab brown. Now that I've got my small complaint about the lighting and the texture out of the way, let's talk about the level layout. This level is more vertical than the last, with the ship being situated roughly in the middle of the map atop a small hill, with one long path snaking around it, interspersed with access points of various kinds. There's a large pond at the bottom of the hill and is accessed by what I call the Plains of Hell, which is the aforementioned fiery blowhog stomping ground. Pathing itself is the biggest challenge to figure out on this level. Combat is still just as simple, and a little trial and error with the new baddies and bosses should make them fairly easy to learn. Fire Pikmin, you will find out, are very quickly immune to blowhog breath, and since they are the more combat-focused Pikmin, they will make short work of all the blowhogs and the puffstool. It's the beady longlegs and the wallywogs that may give you trouble. Before we get too deep in those, let's focus on pathing. Only 3 parts are submerged in water in this level, and only 1 requires yellows to be accessible, and all of them have to go through the Plains of Hell. If you position your army correctly and manage them a bit, you can actually save time by not even killing all the blowhogs in the bottom, and making the reds carry everything once the enemies and puzzles are defeated and completed in a more efficient way to get parts back. Now, blowhogs do make great fodder if you want to rush your blue numbers on the first day in the Forest Navel. I personally like this. The reds don't really have that much purpose outside of combat and numbers in the Forest of Hope. This is really their zone to shine. The only enemies the reds really have to even fear if you don't eliminate them are the shearwigs that will sneak out of the ground and interrupt parts and spoils during their travels. Speaking of shearwigs, talk about an inconvenient and devilish purpose for an enemy. They are literally designed to make sure that you have cleared a path for the parts, especially if you don't go for the really early stone gate breaks at the start of your adventure into the zone. And if you don't clear them out and aren't implementing the just enough Pikmin carrying strat, they can devastate teams if you aren't paying attention. So if you wonder why your numbers are going down and parts are bunching up in a single area, you have fallen for for another beginner's trap. Also, shearwigs that take flight at 15% HP while you're fighting them can eat a bag of hot dogs, you shifty little shits. Not only do they halt progress, fighting them is another time sink if you can't insta-swarm each and every one of the little assholes. Now, not all parts can go through the double gates that lead directly down into the hell plane from the base, so your Pikmin will run across at least 1 to 2 batches of shearwigs in the entire level. There is a third set of shearwigs, but those are part of what I call the false path of the Forest Navel. And that leads me to the long path. Snaking around by the blue starting area and circling nearly 360 degrees around the base is the default path for parts to take if you don't open up any gates. This default path is the most inefficient, inconvenient, and time-sinking way to get parts and spoils back to the base. There are 2 slow paths you can clear out that are distractions, but I like that these exist. They are there for you to test out and find out what works best for the pathing, and by messing around with them, you can make the Pikmin do a funny little dance with the parts. If you use a half combo of the stick bridges in the middle and the innermost bomb walls, parts and spoils will do what I call the if-then tree dance in the middle of the hell fields. I take it Pikmin pathing is going through the entire logic tree in real time of what to do when certain gates and bridges are completed. It's kinda comical, and I hope that anyone who has a chance to set this up and perform it comments below to tell me their experience with this silly little dance. What kills me when you have all the gates open is that having all of them open at the same time should save you time, ideally. But if you mix and match the gates and the stick bridges, there's no optimal path that the Pikmin will take. They will sometimes just take the nearest one or the one that might be efficient. More often than not, the 2 stone gates will take priority, but not always. It just kind of depends on the part or depends on the piece. And on the positioning of where the spoil or the part is when those gates are open, or when the enemy falls, or what direction the part is coming. It's honestly really comical, especially when there are single carry Pikmin items. Sometimes they won't even acknowledge that the gates or the bridges are open, and they'll just right past the gate and walk all the way around by the blue starting area. There's sometimes no rhyme or reason as to why they go back there with single spoils. It's just, that's what the Pikmin want to do. That's what they're going to do. This isn't a game breaker for me. It's silly. It seems like an oversight, and it's fun to watch. It's not optimal, so there's no way to really change it unless you're like an expert at it or a speedrunner. But it's just fun and silly. Now that I've bored you to tears with level pathing in the Forest Navel and made blue food out of nearly all of the fiery blowhogs, I'd like to talk about a couple of the enemies and the bosses. The first thing is the Wallywogs. Both these and their yellow counterparts are highly irregular, devastating, and frustrating enemies. There's no real way to know how many exactly it takes to hold one down to one cycle, a Wallywog, and sometimes you can even have a whole squad of 100 Pikmin swarm one, and they may or may not jump up and crush any helpless Pikmin underneath. If you're lucky, and you don't have to worry, but RNGesus can be a cruel god. These are one reason I'm glad for the addition of Purple and Rock Pikmin later in the series. Purples can just stun lock them into oblivion, and Rock Pikmin, well, they just don't get hurt by fall damage. Those broken, sharp, dense, glorious little bastards are the perfect foil to Wallywogs. They are my favorite Pikmin, not for that reason. It's because they're weird and cute.
And you know how I am about cute.
The other enemy is the unique enemy of the area, the bread bug. You could call him a boss, but he offers no real threat other than he can just steal pellets and small spoils. I love that he just wanders around aimlessly until you spawn a single carry item on the map, and he makes a beeline straight for it to take back to his hidey hole. To beat him, you just have to have him get sucked into the onion while carrying a spoil. He will fight your Pikmin for the part, but he is surprisingly weak, or Pikmin are just incredibly strong, like ants. I really like the bread bug, that to actually defeat him and get the space float, you either have to do that process twice of him getting sucked into the onion, or just bonk him on the head once with a Pikmin before he's carried back to the base. And heck, the space float is technically the easiest part to carry back to the base. It only takes 2 guys to get it nearly to the ship. It's the easiest troop commitment in the entire game. The other enemies I'd like to talk about is the first boss. He's one of them, and he's the easiest to get to, and that's the Puff Stool. In the bottom of the cave with the glowing mushrooms, he doesn't pose an initial threat, but if you don't one-cycle him with a squad of reds, he can turn your Pikmin into Puffmen, and they will attack you and your squad. If you whistle fast enough, you can sometimes save them, but not always. And I hope this mechanic comes back in future Pikmin games. I really like what they did with the Puff Stool. There was a similar type of Pikmin in Pikmin 2, the Bulbmen. They were parasitic and would only join your squad if you killed the alpha. It's too bad we can't make more use of them, and use them to infect other creatures than Bulborbs. I hope that possibility can be explored in further Pikmin games. It'd be really cool to have a Pikmin that's completely useless. Your others have to beat up an enemy and get it to like a weird prone state, and then infect them with a parasitic type Pikmin, and bam, you have a new troop. Even if it was like a one-off, or they only existed in a certain level, I'd love to see that implemented in further Pikmin games. But other than that, the Puff Stool is incredibly easy. Like, aside from turning your guys into evil Pikmin, the only thing he can do is run around awkwardly and avoid you. Besides the Puff Stool, there's really only one other boss in the Forest Navel, the Beady Longlegs. He's this giant four-legged spider-like creature that can stomp on your Pikmin. Pikmin can attack his feet to make him shake and lower his head, and if you use a squad of 100 yellows, you should have more than enough to overwhelm his shake-off cycle. You can bring a small squad of reds to pick up the part after he's gone, but if you overstack your yellows on the guard satellite, they can sprint past the fire geysers. And if a few get singed along the way...
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
The Beady Longlegs is pretty straightforward. Toss, regroup, and repeat. I like that there is a distraction gate next to him, and a stone gate, and the dark coral gate next to him is completely optional, and a huge time sink if you don't have bombs with you. That's the motto of the Forest Navel: optimization. Before we climb back out of the Forest Navel after having taken out both of those bosses and discussed pathing and everything about this level, the Forest Navel has one of my favorite puzzles in a Pikmin game, and the prize is another one of Olimar's useless good luck charms, and it is the only part that can be 100% lost if RNGesus calls his friend Funky Mechanics Kong. Yes, after you implement all three types of Pikmin to access the Libra on the cliffside of the map, beyond where you find the blues, if the physics somehow amplify and bounce the Libra, a required part, off the map, it can't be recovered. It won't come back. It's incredibly rare. I did do a recent playthrough with the guys at Gear Check Games where it almost bounced, but instead it just stood straight up. So the mechanics on that part and the physics are incredibly wonky. And if somebody has had the part fall off before, please comment below. I'd love to hear your stories. I do hear that the physics are adjusted in the Wii version, and I haven't necessarily tested it a lot because I've only played the Wii version a few times compared to a bajillion times that I played it on GameCube, but I would like to try to force it. I wonder if there is a certain way it can fall to increase its level of bounce. I would love to see all the crazy stuff we can do with that part. You hear me, glitch hunters and speed runners? Get to it. I want to see that thing bounce all the way to the base. There is one other thing about the Forest Navel. We do get the blue Pikmin in this zone. And I've refrained from talking about them until the next part because they don't have as much usefulness here. There's only a few parts that they're 100% required for in this zone, but the next zone is the zone that they really shine. They kind of get one whole zone to themselves, whereas reds and yellows get two. And speaking of, get on your waders and water socks. It's time to go to the distant spring. So the Distant Spring is the level that prompted me to want to do a Pikmin 1 retrospective like this. This level is where you will be using everything you learned to its fullest. Time management, pathing, combat.
Everything comes together in this chaotic, submerged, aquatic, brutal, challenging level. For most of this level, you'll be using blue Pikmin as the bulk of your army, simply because nearly every piece needs blues to some capacity. In fact, if you don't do early bowsprit, reds don't even need to be used at all. Its puzzles and problems lend itself to where most of the gates have to be taken down by bombs by simply being rock walls, or are so close to bomb spawn points, it's useless to use Pikmin to knock down the coral/bone walls. Since you will be toting around 80 to 100 blues nearly at all times, this makes your combat prowess for some, if not most of the fights significantly hampered. Even with a full squad, blues just simply don't have the extra oomph to take out most enemies as quickly. This is especially apparent on the yellow Wallywogs. Oh yes, these boys are functionally identical to the pale cousins in the Forest Navel, so RN Jesus is back to taunt us with his ways. And nearly all of these boys are in or at the water's edge. There are certain areas where it would be better to use a squad of reds to eliminate all threats before completing puzzles and clearing paths, like the area what I like to call behind the base. That's the fairly flat region in between where you get the bowsprit and the UV lamp. This area can be simplified by using blues to carry everything through the puddles, but not every pathing for the blues will take them through the puddle and through the gate to the base. The safest, most time-consuming path is to clear out all of the spotty bull bears, which are just bulborbs but bigger, faster, and stronger too, and they're small imitators with reds. However, there are several factors limiting their effectiveness, one being obviously the puddles in the back. And there are these floaty boys in this level that can completely blow all of your upgrades on your Pikmin away, and sometimes right into the sleeping bull bears. These jerks are the puffy blowhogs. I believe the puffy blowhog would get the Grammy for the most inconvenient enemy, but that award should go to somebody else. There is one more enemy added in this level that trumps even the blowhog's level of frustration, and that's the snitch bug. These aren't a threat to your captain necessarily, like the bumbling snitch bug in Pikmin 2, but the snitch bug in 1, 2, and I believe it's in 3 as well, is this little buzzing fly-like creature that goes around and snags 2 of your Pikmin at a time, and then just replants them back into the ground wherever he wants. If you are lucky enough to knock him out of the sky, he may or may not go down in one full squad bear hug. He's annoying, he's dense, and he's swift. I am in complete loathing with this enemy.
Oh, how I hate them!
There is one more enemy I'd like to highlight in the distant spring. The water dumples that hang out near the edge of the map. I always thought they were teenage Wallywogs, but apparently they are in the grub dog family, like the bread bug and the dwarf bulborb. These guys are like the larval bulborbs in Pikmin 2. Small body, big mouth. These guys can eat a lot of Pikmin if you don't take them out of the pathing. They are easy to take out, thankfully. The only downside is that they typically occur in groups of 2 or more. I like little glass cannon enemies like this, just formidable enough to need dealing with. You can distract them with Olimar by running ahead and whacking them with his little hands, but it's not the safest strat for new or casual players. There are only 2 bosses in this area you can fight. One is a repeat of the armored cannon beetle in the center of the map, and the other is an optional boss, featured as one of the many spirits you get in Smash Ultimate, the Smoky Prog, the deadliest, most terrifying enemy in Pikmin 1. This ghastly boss can kill you by just walking or wafting or wafting over your troops. His attacks scatter and destroy few guys at a time, but the cloud of poo gas he leaves behind instantly vaporizes your squaddies. If you can defeat him, he will drop the golden pearl once you can chuck enough guys on him, but he will probably use an entire squad just to fight, so you really aren't out any guys, because The pearl gives you 100 guys. But he's definitely fun, and he's fright. He's one of those bosses that will destroy the uninitiated and be a fun challenge, and time sink for those more familiar with the game's controls. Outside of the new enemies, this area also features more and different puzzles. One of my favorites is the small puzzle to get the repair type bolt. It's the closest and easiest to get to, but it's a bit of a thinker. When I was younger, I thought you had to slowly take 1 or 2 guys down the narrow bridge and chuck them up to the part, but there's a small ledge parallel to the bridge that you can use the C stick in conjunction with slowly moving Olimar down the bridge. You can use yellows, like I said, by just taking 1 or 2 down the bridge and chucking them up at it, but there's a higher probability of once they get it off the ledge, they're going to fall right into the water, and it would be nearly impossible to get them out. There's also a very frustrating height-based section to get the UV lamp. This puzzle has lots of tight corners and pits, and you can be harassed by the local puffy blowhawk. So yes, another part where it's good to take out the local beasties. Overall, I really like this no holds bars section of the game. It's combat heavy, has some interesting puzzles, and completely skippable puzzles. The glue-on drive puzzle to switch blues to yellows to get the drive down is completely skippable. It's easily replicated and can be done in both the Wii and GameCube versions of the game. Nobody knows exactly how it works, and I watched an AGDQ speedrun by Captain X24, and that's how I learned how to do it. If you leave the bull bear closest to the UV lamp alive and throw all of your blue Pikmin on the short ledge by the edge of the map near him, you wake up the bull bear and have it chase you, and you stand on the ledge that takes you to the UV lamp access area, and you have the bull bear come straight at you on the ledge. Somehow you clip into him and he phases you through the geometry, and you can get up to the inaccessible ledge that's 1 stage higher than you are. You can grab your squad of blues and walk around an invisible wall or 2 and just snag the glue-on drive. You don't even have to change your blues into yellows. It's my favorite skip in the game because it's so full of mystery that it has to be seen to believe.
I love that speedrun shit.
So combat, monsters, water, and fun little puzzles are done for, so we need to make a quick little skip back to the landing site.
So I forgot to discuss it in the episode proper, so I'm recording this post everything else, because I'm dumb and I am a bad writer. There was one more comparison between Pikmin and Joust that I wanted to make, and I know I talked about the snitch bug. I'd like to compare the snitch bug to the pterodactyl. He's annoying. The pterodactyl itself can eliminate you, but mostly he just makes you change your movements. He can eliminate you, but I like to compare him to the snitch bug because he makes you nervous and he changes how you move and he throws chaos into the ring. Because the immediate danger of the snitch bug isn't necessarily the fact that he can hurt you, it's the fact that he makes you erratic, and he can throw you into accidentally walking into the big bull bears, whatever they're called, the big ones, the red ones in the third area. So that was the comparison I wanted to make, and I apologize for the sloppy nature of this blurb. But hey, you're still watching, aren't you?
I'm recording this bit after the fact, but the little spot where you get the UV lamp, I just don't like it. It's frustrating. Like, it's so vertical, and like you can just lose Pikmin if you just turn the wrong way down the pit. And then if they go all the way down the pit, you gotta go fish them out, and they gotta do a stick puzzle. It's one of those like inconvenient time sinks the game lays for you, like a literal trap. And I look across the ocean at the developers, and I'm like, did it have to be this way? Did you have to make the UV lamp puzzle this frustrating? Please, Miyamoto, don't do this to me. Now, I detailed at least one of the reasons I love the return to the landing zone near the beginning of this video, but allow me to flesh them out here. Aside from getting the positron generator, this day is a day to fight the optional bosses, and a day to recover and build your forces. It's a nice little relaxing pace change compared to the action and puzzles of the Distant Spring and the Forest Navel. And the 2 bosses are pretty interesting. The first one is the dopey and slightly frustrating Mamuta that appears on day 8 and any even-numbered day after that. And the other is the Gulix, the strange and frightening goo monster that appears on day 9 and any odd-numbered day after that. Now, the Mamuta is easy to fight. He can't hurt the Pikmin, and he can only hurt Olimar with his little hand slaps, and he can only plant your Pikmin. He can't hurt your Pikmin. So you may have to pull up boys that get planted in the ground during the fight. And the hitbox on his hands is a bit irregular, so you will have to work extra hard to avoid his little slaps. The Gulix, I don't know the actual strategy to kill the Gulix. I don't know if there's a quick strat, because every time I fight him, I just put a squad of 100 blues on his pearly core and just have them go to town for a solid 2 or 3 minutes while he just kind of is kited by Olimar as I walk around the arena. All other Pikmin drown in its body, so it's safe to say that it's full of water, and you can't really use bombs or reds on them because they'll just drown or get killed. This is another time the middling blues get their day in the sun, water, swatter. This is the enemy theory crafters and diehard fans think transforms into or is simply related to the Water Wraith in Pikmin 2 and the Plasma Wraith in Pikmin 3. The Gulix is ultimately easy to defeat and can be kited, and ultimately ignored if you open the coral/bone gate that's in the final area. The only other enemies in the area are the 3 pearly clamps, which house 2 pearls respectively and the positron generator. Now these boys, I'm convinced, have irregular clamp times when you're trying to harvest their treasure. I've lost more than my fair share of blues and yellows on the return to this zone than I care to admit. Now I must say I really like this zone, and it's my favorite to do in challenge mode since it's so compact. It's fun and challenging to get a high score in. Now that we've relaxed again in the landing site and took out 1 of 2 incredibly silly bosses, I think it's time to move on to the final challenge. Blast off with me at least one more time as we go to the final trial. First things first when we get to the landing zone is that anxiety-inducing music coming through your speakers. It's one of those tracks I feel like it speeds up a little every time it loops. You are greeted with a 3-part puzzle immediately in front of you to construct a straight line to the boss arena. There's a tiny skip where you don't have to use reds to get around the fire geysers. Once you have the stone wall and the stick bridges down, you can throw a bunch of yellows on the ledge at the end of the geyser path. Unnecessary, and it doesn't save that much time, but it is fun to do and pull off, especially when friends are present. The real prize of this area, the real meat and potatoes of the final trial, is that big boy, that hoss, that chunky lad in the center, the Emperor Bulbax. This mess is a real stinker. He's real particular to fight. On the far side of the map beyond the boss arena is a grassy semicircle where you can pick up a shitload of bombs. Just stock up on every bomb you see, because you may need them. And bring a squad of like 70 reds. You don't want to go all the way back. You have to get a yellow within chucking distance of the Emperor when he opens his mouth to swallow everything in front of him in a wide arc. Your yellow will either toss a bomb in his mouth and return to you if he's quick enough, or will be tongue slapped into the beast. Either way, you get the same result, a big stun where you can chuck guys up on his face. It's best to do this with red since they do the most damage. It's wash, rinse, and repeat until he's half dead. Then he will fire up the RNG machine. Now he's a bit faster, and he will also potentially leap into the air and butt bomb your last known location. This can be a run killer if you went out there haphazardly with your whole face attacking squad. It's best to play him very conservatively. Oh, also, he can take out a significant portion of your squad if you are in front of him after he's eaten your bomb. The explosion fires out of his mouth. It can damage you and any Pikmin near you and stun Olimar's, wasting an entire face-hugging cycle. So the big tell in his second stage, his second phase, if you will, to tell you if it's safe to stick one of your bait yellows out there, is if his mouth salivates when he's turning around, he's ready to lick rather than leap. I like this visual cue. It's kind of like the cannon beetle in the first and the third areas. Once you do this process over and over, he's done for. He violently gets sucked into the shadow realm and spurts out a bunch of pellets, and the final part, the most required part of the game. It's a fucking piggy bank. Do Copites and Hokatations transport large amounts of currency in giant piggy banks in unarmored space trucks manned by bumbling space truckers? I think Space Gardo wants a word with you, Olimar. Okay, rant over, but I thought the space float and the good luck charms were silly enough. This is the most unnecessary required item. Unless it's what the president sold the ship for in Pikmin 2, then it all makes sense. But alone, it's a silly addition. It's that little dry, silly sense of humor that makes the world of Pikmin so enjoyable. Once you drag that piggy bank back to the ship and have collected all your other pieces in the game, that's game over. The Pikmin wave a little goodbye to you and you blast off. If you get the 100% ending, which isn't difficult to do at all, you see the onions chase after you, and you see colors that aren't even featured in other games. They want to travel the stars with you, but are tied to the same thing that brought you there. They evolved on Earth, not on Kopite or Hokotate. Kind of bittersweet every time you have to leave PNF 404. You get treated to a credit sequence that reminds me a little bit of the Donkey Kong Country endings, where you get to see all the enemies and bosses showcased and described. It's a nice little recap of all the friends we made along the way.
I love that.
I know I'm ending this video a little short, but that's only because I want to do review videos for the other two games in the main series of Pikmin. Because in all reality, it was Pikmin 2 that inspired me to make this one, because I want to make it a 3-part series. There's a little-known YouTuber by the name of Marlucium that did a similar 3-part series about Pikmin, and I'd like to kind of cover points that he didn't really get to in his videos, or maybe overlooked. And I'd like to, in my mind, treat this as a companion piece to those, kind of like a 6-part mini-series. So Marlucium, if you're out there, I like your work, man. And I think that me cutting this video kind of short, well, comparatively, to what some of my inspirations are, I think that's tied to the fact that Pikmin 1 is the shortest campaign of the 3 Pikmins. I mean, Pikmin 3 can kind of be considered short if you don't go the all fruits route, and I'd like to discuss that further once I get to those games, and I feel like each one kind of deserves its own little nugget. Its own little contained piece. Short and sweet, just like Pikmin 1. So in finality, I'd like to sum up my thoughts on Pikmin 1 by doing a short little comparison. And I hope this carries through, and maybe it'll even change when I cover the other 2 main games in the series. My comparison, and if you agree or disagree with my comparisons, comment below, and maybe I'll cover that in the future endeavors. My comparison goes, Pikmin 1 is all about time and management and speed, and strategy. Pikmin 2, combat and strategy, there's obvious overcorrections and quality of life changes and world building and comedy, and also really good music in Pikmin 2. Now, Pikmin 3 is about exploration, set pieces. Honestly, I think it's more boss-focused. And it's atmospheric, at least more so compared to 2 and 1. They had a little more oomph in the hardware to work with when working on Pikmin 3, since they skipped a generation. Also, let me know if you listened to this whole video by answering my hot takes on the 3 Pikmin games. I used to think Pikmin 3 was the best game in the trilogy, and I'll always have a soft spot for 1 in my heart, but upon further replays, I think the next game in the series might be becoming my favorite. So comment below if you do or do not agree. Thanks, y'all.